Have you ever really looked at a blueprint for, like, a skyscraper?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the engineering on those is just incredibly precise.
Right, exactly. Because you can see the exact load-bearing walls, the placement of the steel girders, the depth of the concrete
And
foundation.
that's all mapped out.
It's a mathematical certainty, you
Yeah.
know? If you build it this way, the structure stands. And if you don't,
It falls. Yeah, it's entirely structural. It's designed to withstand very specific, measurable forces, like wind shear or, seismic activity.
exactly, there is zero ambiguity in a steel girder.
No, definitely not.
But then you look at blueprints for human behavior, specifically what it means to be a man or a woman.
Oh, boy. Yeah, that's a whole different ballgame.
Right. Suddenly, all that mathematical certainty just completely vanishes. We are dealing with blueprints drawn in like invisible ink.
Yeah.
They're constantly being erased, redrawn, and just fiercely debated, depending on, well, what era or culture you happen to be standing in.
I mean, trying to pin down a structural definition of a gender ideal is like the ultimate architectural challenge. It's always a reflection of the anxieties and the aspirations of the person who's actually drawing the blueprint.
Which is exactly what we are unpacking in today's deep dive. We have our hands on a very specific, incredibly detailed architectural blueprint for masculinity.
Yes, we do.
And it comes to us from a 2011 translated essay by an author named Xuefeng. It's titled The 8 Characteristics of a Masculine Man.
And just to set the stage for you listening, this is not your typical modern self-help checklist.
No, definitely not.
Like, we're not talking about a podcast guru telling you to wake up at 5 a.m., take a cold plunge, and, optimize your protein intake.
Right, it's not about biohacking.
Exactly. Xuefeng's text is written with this soaring, almost apocalyptic language. He pulls heavily from ancient Chinese history, poetry, and mythology to, construct this ideal.
The sheer scale of the opening quotes is honestly breathtaking. We're
Yeah.
talking about describing a man who, quote, absorbs the essence of the sun and moon.
Yeah, it's huge.
A man who inherits the grand, righteous spirit of 1,000 years.
It doesn't get much more epic than that.
No. So, whether you come to this from an interest in gender studies, philosophy, cultural literature, or just understanding how different people construct their ideals, this text is a fascinating artifact.
It really is. And our roadmap for today is, well, we're going to look at the philosophical foundation first,
Right.
then break down the actual 8 traits, and finally get into the author's somewhat controversial views on how this masculinity survives in the modern world.
Sounds like a plan. So jumping into that foundation, he hits the reader with a tidal wave of historical and literary references right out of the gate.
He really does.
Yeah.
He envisions an ideal man who combines the wisdom of Jiang Ziya, the strategy of Zhang Liang, the cunning of Zhu Jiang, and the literary talent of the poet Li Bai.
Okay, wait. I recognize Li Bai as one of the most famous romantic poets in Chinese history.
Yes.
And Zhu Liang is the legendary mastermind from the Three Kingdoms era. But, I mean, stacking all these figures together seems almost impossible.
It's a massive ask.
You're asking for a mythic military strategist, a political genius, and a transcendent romantic poet all wrapped into one person.
Yeah, Xuefeng is deliberately synthesizing different domains of, absolute mastery. He's demanding supreme intellect, strategic genius, and deep artistic sensitivity simultaneously.
Wow.
And he compares this archetype to towering peaks, ancient pines standing firm against the wind, and cranes soaring through the heavens. It's basically a demand for a philosopher king.
But then the text takes this wild pivot, right? It jumps from ancient sages straight into this epic martial revolutionary poetry.
Oh yeah, the tone shifts completely.
There are quotes about sweeping away pests harming mankind and mentions of how the Red Army fears not the difficulties of the Long March. It gets incredibly aggressive.
Yeah, to understand that pivot, we kind of have to look at the specific cultural and spiritual context of the author.
Okay, lay it on me.
So, Xuefeng attributes these towering traits to what he calls Lifechanyuan celestials and Chanyuan academicians.
Lifechanyuan.
Yeah, it's a philosophical and spiritual community founded by the author. It focuses on returning to a harmonious, almost utopian state of nature.
Oh, okay. So this isn't just general life advice.
No.
He's framing this concept of masculinity as part of a highly specific spiritual vanguard. He talks about a group of 3,000 selfless warriors galloping.
Right.
It implies that being this kind of man is a cosmic duty, not just, a personal aesthetic or lifestyle choice.
Exactly. It's a cosmic duty to bring about a new era. And that apocalyptic grandeur is really the soil from which these 8 characteristics grow.
Which actually brings up something I really struggled to reconcile in the text.
What's that?
Well, despite all this aggressive poetry about adjusting his cap in fury and, like, striking the water to halt flying boats,
Right.
Xuefeng explicitly states early on that a masculine man bases his strength in gentleness.
Yeah, he argues that only by embracing gentleness can a man fully reveal his masculine beauty.
I was trying to wrap my head around that for so long. How do you strike the water in fury but base your strength in gentleness?
It seems like an oxymoron.
Exactly. The best analogy I could come up with is martial arts.
Okay, I like where this is going.
Think about Tai Chi. In Tai Chi, true, unbreakable strength actually relies on being entirely flexible and yielding.
Well, that's a great way to look at it.
Right. If you're rigid, a stronger force will just break you. But if you're fluid, you can absorb and redirect anything.
That maps beautifully onto the philosophy here. The text demands a profound balance between this tragic, roaring grandeur and a deep, accommodating emotional depth.
So the gentleness isn't weakness.
No, not at all. The gentleness Xuefeng describes is the internal shock absorber.
Ah.
It's the foundation that allows extreme external power to exist without the man just, burning himself out.
Okay, so we have this mythic, highly balanced foundation. But what happens when this guy actually steps out into the real world?
That's where we get to the actual traits. Xuefeng outlines a series of behavioral traits that focus heavily on explosive action versus internal stillness.
Yeah, the contrast is wild. Let's look at trait 1.
So trait 1 revolves around extraordinary spirit, bravery, and courage. Xuefeng leans heavily into elemental forces here.
He does. He describes this man as a whistling arrow shot straight to its target. He's thunder and lightning.
Yeah.
He's a rushing river and a roaring fire capable of turning deserts to ashes.
But then, immediately after painting that incredibly intense picture.
Right. Trait 2, he demands the exact opposite.
Yep. He says this man must be steady as a mountain, calm and composed.
It's crazy. While he is a roaring fire, he's also supposed to remain completely calm amid chaotic clouds. The text claims that no matter the winds or waves, he strolls through life as if in a garden.
It's the ultimate juxtaposition, right? Unstoppable momentum on one side and complete inner tranquility on the other.
I mean, I see the poetry in it, definitely. But I struggle to buy this as a functioning human psychology. You cannot be a roaring fire that turns deserts to ash and simultaneously stroll casually through a garden. Those are completely opposing psychological states.
Well, let's think about it like the engineering of a high-performance sports car.
Okay.
You have an engine that goes from 0 to 60 in 1 second. That's the roaring fire.
Sure.
But you also need a world-class suspension system. One that keeps the ride so incredibly smooth that the driver feels nothing no matter how fast they're going.
Okay, that actually makes sense. And that sports car analogy is a perfect lens for another core tension in Xuefeng's blueprint.
You mean trait 4?
Yes, exactly. Trait 4 demands that this man be rugged and bold, yet not without finesse.
Right?
He has a loud voice, he's bold in emotion, and this is the kicker he plans with meticulous, microscopic attention to detail.
And that's what trips you up.
Yes. How does the text reconcile a rugged, roaring persona with being meticulous? Usually the guy who is the roaring fire, he's not the guy sweating over an Excel spreadsheet or checking the microscopic details of a logistics plan.
Yeah, those are usually 2 very different guys in the office.
Right.
Well, Xuefeng resolves this by leaning on an ancient Chinese concept, Dazirouyu.
Which translates to?
It translates to great wisdom seeming like folly.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, the idea is that external boldness, even a seeming lack of concern for trivialities, must be anchored by intense internal precision.
So he looks like he's just winging it, but he actually spent 10 hours preparing the night before.
Essentially, yes. He operates decisively in the moment. He doesn't get bogged down in petty details when action is required, but his overarching plans, they were carefully calculated long before the action even began.
Okay. So the ruggedness is the execution and the finesse is the preparation.
Perfectly said.
So if he possesses this perfectly calibrated engine, where is he supposed to drive it?
Well, the text seems to point directly toward the absolute unknown. Xuefeng frames the masculine man fundamentally as a daring adventurer and romantic.
Yeah, let's talk about the adventurer side, trait 3. The text lists 4 specific historical figures to illustrate this.
Right. He brings up Roald Amundsen, conquering the ice crevices of the South Pole.
Incredible.
He mentions Marco Polo braving pirates to seek treasures in the East. He includes Yu Xieke, the famous Chinese geologist exploring mountains and rivers, and Columbus, sailing the vast ocean for truth.
It's a very specific type of historical figure, isn't it? He didn't choose inventors or politicians or artists. He chose geographic conquerors.
Yeah, men who threw themselves against unforgiving physical environments.
It really seems like the physical world is the ultimate testing ground for that internal engine we were just talking about.
The extreme environment is necessary to forge the metal. But navigating those extremes requires a very specific psychological tool.
Which brings us to trait 6.
Yes, the romantic spirit. Xuefeng claims this man never retreats and always sees light in adversity.
And this is where I found a really fascinating detail. The text notes that this ideal man uses exuberant language, imaginative expression, and exaggeration to create happiness and ideal spiritual realms. Exaggeration. We usually think of exaggeration as a character flaw, you know? It's the guy at the bar telling tall tales or lying about his accomplishments to inflate his ego.
It sounds like bragging.
Exactly.
But if we look closely at the mechanics of Xuefeng's argument, we see this brilliant psychological reframing. The exaggeration he praises isn't about deceiving others for personal gain. It is a vital coping mechanism.
Walk me through the logic there. How is exaggeration a survival tool?
Okay, think about those explorers he just listed. Imagine you are freezing in an ice crevasse in the South Pole with Amundsen.
I'd rather not, but okay.
Right. Now, stark, objective realism in that moment might lead directly to despair. If you say, we have a 90% chance of freezing to death today, you might just lie down and freeze.
That makes sense.
According to Xuefeng, the masculine man uses grand poetic language to actively construct a better reality. He exaggerates the positive. He paints a wildly optimistic picture of the future to maintain morale when facing extreme hardship.
Oh, wow. He's basically building a psychological campfire with his words. He has to keep his crew and himself warm when the physical realm is literally trying to kill them.
That is a phenomenal way to put it, a psychological campfire. The language itself becomes a mechanism of endurance. It's a way to forge an ideal spiritual realm to overlay on top of a brutal physical reality.
Okay, so we've seen him in the wild. He's conquering ice crevices, commanding the thunder, building psychological campfires. But how does this guy operate on a Tuesday at the office? Or, like, at a dinner party?
Yeah, he can't just be a roaring fire in the break room.
Right. And Xuefeng doesn't just leave him in the wilderness. He brings him back into society with strict rules for social conduct and aesthetics.
This is where the soaring poetry hits the pavement of daily interaction. Xuefeng outlines a very specific code of gentlemanly conduct. This is trait 5.
Let's hear it.
He dictates that this man never bullies the vulnerable, the sick, or the elderly. Crucially, the author states he never yells at women or children. He is humble and respectful toward gentle women, and is the first to take the lead to protect the weak when danger strikes.
It's a highly protective, almost chivalric code.
Very much so.
But it goes beyond just physical protection. There's a psychological duty as well. Under trait 7, Xuefeng says this man must be humorous and witty, bringing joy wherever he goes.
Yeah, but he frames this negatively too, which is interesting.
Right. He specifically states this man never uses others as an emotional dumping ground and never pollutes the environment with pessimism.
Which connects perfectly back to that campfire analogy you made. Regulating his own emotions, and thereby regulating the emotional temperature of the room, is portrayed as a fundamental masculine duty.
Complaining isn't just annoying. Xuefeng frames it as an environmental pollutant.
Yeah, a literal toxin in the air.
And that discipline extends all the way down to his physical appearance. Trait 8.
Oh yes, trait 8.
Xuefeng states that masculinity is an elegance. He isn't slovenly, he isn't unkempt, he dresses neatly, speaks with conviction, and operates with extreme efficiency. Meaning, no wasted words, actions, or time.
It is a complete rejection of vulgarity and aimless behavior.
Totally. It rejects the modern stereotype we sometimes see, where manliness is about being the grimy lumberjack who actively refuses to care about how he looks.
The I don't care aesthetic.
Yeah. Xuefeng's framework feels much closer to like a classic James Bond aesthetic.
Yes, exactly.
It's a guy who can absolutely survive a brutal fight in the wilderness, but he always looks impeccably tailored. He never wastes a single physical movement, and he never loses his charm in a crowded room.
The word that comes to mind is poise.
Poise.
Poise is the physical and aesthetic manifestation of that internal mountain-like calmness we've talked about earlier. Its energy perfectly contained and efficiently directed.
Okay, so up to this point, Xuefeng has built this monumental, seemingly invincible skyscraper of a man.
Right.
We're talking about roaring fires, ice conquerors, impeccably tailored gentlemen. But then in the final section of the essay, the text takes a remarkably sharp turn.
It really does.
Having built this invincible structure, he suddenly warns us about how incredibly easy it is for the building to collapse.
Yeah, the essay concludes with this sweeping sociological argument about the environmental threats to masculinity. Xuefeng posits that while some masculinity is innate, it is largely cultivated through nurturing and environment.
And according to his framework, a man's masculine qualities are suppressed or worn down if he grows up in an environment dominated by what the text translates as temperamental women, specifically listing grandmothers, mothers, and wives.
Right, and he broadens this to the educational and professional spheres as well. The essay states that if a man's teachers are mostly female, his masculinity might be unconsciously worn down. Furthermore, he argues that serving too long under a strong-willed female boss gradually erodes a man's masculinity, and that a culture that is too feminized leads to a total depletion of masculine energy.
Now, just as a quick note for you listening, we're handling this strictly as an exploration of the source material's viewpoint.
Right. Our goal is to impartially unpack the author's framework, not to take sides or endorse these specific views.
Exactly. We're just looking at the architecture of his argument.
Yeah.
And structurally, we have to unpack this because on the surface, there is a glaring contradiction here.
Oh, absolutely.
In the opening, Xuefeng says a man bases his strength in gentleness. That was the whole Tai Chi foundation we discussed.
Yes.
But in this conclusion, he explicitly states, gentleness should be seen as unbecoming, and argues that being around strong women depletes a man's energy. How does the author's logic hold those two opposing ideas at once?
Yeah, the tension lies in how Xuefeng defines the source of a man's power.
Okay.
On one hand, he compares masculine energy to towering peaks and roaring fires capable of turning deserts to ashes, forces of nature that are practically invincible.
Right.
But on the other hand, he views masculinity as a highly fragile resource.
You just built Superman, and now you're telling me his kryptonite is his grandmother. Or his manager at work.
It sounds absurd when you put it like that, but to understand Xuefeng's logic here, we have to look at what his ideal man requires to function.
Okay, what does he require?
This roaring fire requires absolute, unfiltered forward momentum. It requires autonomy. The argument implies that submitting to a matriarchal structure, whether familial or professional, forces a psychological accommodation.
Oh, I see.
It forces the man to adapt to a different set of behavioral rules, which Xuefeng believes slowly snuffs out that wild, pioneering fire.
So the gentleness he praises early on is an internal tool the man controls and deploys on his own terms.
Yes.
But the gentleness he condemns at the end refers to external influences that force the man into submission.
Precisely. Xuefeng seems to view true masculinity not as a permanent self-sustaining state, but as a fragile ecosystem.
A fragile ecosystem.
Yeah. And in his view, that ecosystem requires a highly specific patriarchal environment to survive. He's drawing a hard line between an internal virtue that a man wields and an environmental threat that neutralizes him.
It is so fascinating to see the blueprint wrestle with itself like that.
It really is.
The text oscillates between this vision of an omnipotent celestial warrior and a delicate trait that must be shielded from female bosses. It really highlights how complex these cultural blueprints are.
Definitely.
Even a framework built on the rhetoric of ancient, unshakable stones is still deeply entangled with very modern anxieties about social roles, shifting workplace dynamics, and changing family structures.
It reveals that the architect of this blueprint is profoundly aware of and perhaps anxious about the changing environment around him. The towering peak is terrified of erosion.
The towering peak is terrified of erosion. Wow. Let's pull back and look at the whole structure we've explored today.
Let's do it.
We started with the epic poetry and historical wisdom of figures like Li Bai and Zhu Liang.
The Philosopher King Foundation.
Right. And we watched this ideal man operate as both a roaring fire and a calm mountain, blending rugged action with meticulous hidden preparation.
The Dazi Ru Yu. And we examined the daring explorer and the romantic who uses exuberant language as a psychological campfire to survive adversity.
And we saw the impeccably tailored gentleman who protects the vulnerable, regulates the emotional temperature of a room, but ultimately feels his deeply cultivated masculinity is under constant threat by the modern environments around him.
Which leaves us with a really fascinating application for our own lives.
Yeah.
Well, Xuefeng heavily defines this masculinity through physical geographic exploration,
Sure.
conquering the ice crevices of the South Pole, sailing vast, uncharted oceans, traversing literal, unforgiving mountains.
Amundsen and Marco Polo, the physical world as the ultimate testing ground.
Exactly. But look at the world we live in today. It is highly digital. The literal map of the Earth is, for the most part, fully drawn.
Yeah, there aren't many blank spots left on the map.
Right. Our adventures and our conquests are increasingly remote. They take place behind screens, in virtual environments, or in the highly abstract spaces of the modern knowledge economy.
There are very few uncharted oceans left to sail for truth.
Which raises an important question for you listening to mull over as you go about your day. Think about your own workplace, your own ambitions. How does one channel the spirit of Columbus or Zhujiake today?
That's tough.
Can this deeply physical elemental archetype of the roaring fire and the towering peak survive in the virtual age? Or does the blueprint for masculinity fundamentally need to be redrawn for a world where the wilderness has been replaced by the Wi-Fi connection?
That is an incredible question to leave off on. If the physical testing grounds are gone, where does the arrow shoot?
Exactly.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We have loved exploring this blueprint with you, invisible ink, contradictions, and all. Until next time.